As you know, paraphrasing is when you take a quote and put it into your own words entirely. You might paraphrase something when you feel like you can say it in a more understandable way for your readers. On the other hand, you might choose to quote when you feel like you can't say it better than the original. So that's something that you have to decide. Paraphrasing requires the same type of integration as quoting does, so the same stuff that we just went over, but we have to be careful in paraphrasing so that it doesn't become a form of plagiarism. With that in mind, here are some things that you want to do when you paraphrase. First of all, define any words that you don't know, especially when it comes to paraphrasing a complex academic article like Brandt's, where she uses a lot of jargon. You need to figure out what the words mean and make that clear to your readers. After that, you should consider the context of the quotation. Where in the article did the quote come from? What section is it from? What's going on in that section? Once you understand where a quote comes from, you can then look for relationships in the quote or in the section that you want to paraphrase. Looking for relationships gives you a better grasp of what's being said, but it also avoids the tendency to just substitute synonyms for words in the quote, which would actually be plagiarism. So, having said that, we get to number 4. When you're paraphrasing something, you must change not just the words in the original quote, but also the sentence structure. You have to really make it your own. Lastly, you still need to include an in-text citation when you paraphrase. You have to let readers know where the paraphrase comes from, since it's still somebody else's ideas. Let's look at a few examples of paraphrasing. First, we'll take a look at an incorrect version, or basically just a version that doesn't work. So our original quote is, again, from Brandt. She says, "Sponsors enable and hinder literacy activity, often forcing the formation of new literacy requirements while decertifying older ones." And then the paraphrase of that, in this case, is, "Brandt claims that sponsors give and suppress literacy opportunity. They frequently create new literacy expectations while making older ones obsolete." Looking at the original quote and then the paraphrase, hopefully a few things raise some red flags for you. First, we have the original phrase up here about what sponsors do. They enable and hinder literacy activity. And then if you look down where in the paraphrase version, we have sponsors give and suppress literacy opportunity. So all the writer's really done here is switched out a few words, specifically give, suppress, and opportunity. We haven't actually changed the structure. We've just put in a few synonyms. That doesn't quite work. That happens again in the second half of the paraphrase. So this entire thing is mainly just putting in a few synonyms and not actually changing the structure or anything like that. And as you know, paraphrasing needs to be a lot more than that. To fix that, something you might do would be, this is just kind of a recommendation, when you want to paraphrase something, I would say you should try putting the ideas in the quote into your own words without actually looking at the quote itself. Just take some time away from the quote, get the structure and the rhythm of it out of your head, and then write your paraphrase. So I would say that in this second example here, that the writer does a better job of that. All right, so we've got our original quote again. Sponsors enable and hinder literacy activity, often forcing the formation of new literacy requirements while decertifying older ones. And then our new paraphrase. Sponsors determine the qualifications for what it means to be literate. They influence people's literacy practices by frequently creating new expectations for literacies. In this case, you can already tell that the rhythm of the paraphrase is different than the original sentence. And ultimately what the writer is trying to do is just make sense of the original quote. They do that in several ways. In the first clause of the paraphrase, the writer connects to Brandt's idea that's mentioned toward the end of the quote. where Brant says sponsors force the formation of new literacy requirements while de-rectifying older ones. Essentially, the writer is saying that by determining the qualifications for literacy, sponsors are the ones who allow people to be literate. So they just take what Brant says and they put it in a similar context and in a similar way without actually just substituting words. Okay, the overall idea is to try and figure out what the original is saying and then put it in your own words and your own sentence structure, but to do that without sacrificing what the original quote actually means. So this one does a good job of that.